So, further down the rabbit hole, and no light in sight. As I dig deeper into Isekai as a genre with no apparent care for relevance, chronology, or my sanity, I thought I would change up what I'm looking at this time around at least and venture into more sincere territory. So if you're new to this series or channel, welcome. You picked a poor choice in videos to start off with, but who am I to judge your decisions when I'm subjecting myself to masochistic torture like this? I'm currently digging through Isekai in a sort of retrospective to answer some basic questions, like why it shambles onward like some twisted undead monstrosity. So follow me as I vivisect this particular show to figure out what makes it an Isekai, how it shaped the modern trend, and maybe get a bit of insight on why it lingers around like a fart in an elevator. So with that said, let's get into ReZero. I always start off with some background to fill out the video's runtime. I mean, give my audience some perspective as to not imply this series exists in the void. Starting life as a web novel in 2012, and I told you that would be a running theme, ReZero was adapted into light novel form in 2014. And if you don't mind, I'd like to indulge a bit in that side of the equation. As many Isekai stories started off as self-published web novels blasted out on social media by their sole creators, picked up by the industry when noticed for their popularity, and repackaged into light novels for a more coherent presentation. Those light novels are sometimes even readapted themselves as manga volumes and an anime, leaving a weird grab bag of continuity depending on which source you want to subscribe to. Many of these are passion projects written by amateurs, reeking of a plethora of issues plaguing serialization in long-running fiction. That is, unfocused plots with meandering, vague goals and events that could easily be reshuffled into any order and not change the story one bit, or just sidetrack the main plot entirely. Coincidentally, many of those tend to be recycled elements from other media or the series itself. These are reined in quite a bit when the switch is made to light novel form, as they suddenly have an editor and publisher looking to make a profit. So a 60-chapter detour on a dungeon crawler isn't a waste of time for the readers. Or something like that. While the web novel might be the original, it's basically the rough draft, as light novels are gone over with a fine-tooth comb to iron out any of the kinks. Which brings us back to ReZero, which was apparently given a 1,000-page draft for the first book alone, shaved down to 250 with a greater focus on characters rather than the world, which kind of informs on the priorities of an otaku writer used to listening to their fans. The web novel prototype is usually where the story picks up steam online, underground in the deep otaku breeding ground, which launches the mainstream success for the light novel proper. That's the initial fanbase who will buy the volumes when they're first released, boosting sales and drawing word of mouth with an industry promotional team shoving it out through mainstream channels. Which offers more answers why isekais are so often steeped in otaku tropes. Not just are they written by hardcore otakus, their initial shaping audience were otakus, further sculpting the story into that shape on an impressionable writer with a hungry audience. And as the genre picks up steam, we're seeing these progenitors used as inspiration for the newer generation. In some sort of twisted otaku wank Ouroboros. Good luck getting that mental picture out of your head. So an isekai, which means a dude, other world, adventure, yada yada yada, but where isekais usually have the protagonist dying or being put in another world by a god or what have you, this one is probably one of the early adapters of the who gives a shit approach. He blinks and is in another world with little rhyme or reason at the start. And I've been seeing this trope a lot more often lately, where there's less emphasis on the how or why, at least at the introduction of these series. I don't know if this was avant-garde in 2016 when this anime was made, or if this indeed happened in the light novel or web novel, because I can't be expected to do basic research. But it feels like there was a definite shift after this show's popularity, where the main character dying or how the hell he ended up there didn't really matter that much. Probably because the target demographic honestly doesn't care. They're there for the fights, world, and awesome shit. Not some convoluted plot about a god screwing up a guy's death or whatever. This trend of insincerity and self-aware continues through this series as well. When the main character arrives in this world, he's a nobody. There's no mage around him, he's not given armor, and he can't even read the language. But based off his knowledge of pop culture, he expected to have magic powers and be treated like somebody important. Only to realize he's just some dude, even throwing a tantrum over it before his power manifests. It starts this subversion of the trend before doing a 180 and doubling down on it, because he is special still, boasting OP strength for an average guy and a magic power that lets him rewind time by dying. But the fact that it still did that fake out makes me wonder if a series with roots dating all the way back to 2012 and feels it necessary to use a wink and a nod at the audience to convey it knows what it's doing is played out. Just how quickly did this trend become a cliche that even the more serious shows like this one still needed to poke fun at themselves? How far back does it go, because Isekai is already acting postmodern? I'm at a point where I just expect fantasy as a given for these shows, as no one wants to see a dude sent off to live in the 1800s or a few hundred years in the future, I guess. I mean, I would, but I also live in a garbage can. The magic system and world are more developed in this series than the vague concepts of worshipping a deity, fantasy races, guilds, and what have you. There was work put into that aspect, and I do appreciate that. Specifically, the number of demi-human races in this series is higher than most, and how they've got their own culture. That adds to some neat social dynamics. So what sets this one apart from its contemporaries? How does this series stand out as popular or defining? And what does it lend to other isekais? Well, dying. A lot of it. I guess this was probably the first brutal isekai? One that delved deep into dark fantasy. Not just gore, but legit dark and disturbing themes. A lot of the fluffiness in the first episode sets up the harder hitting grittiness later. And that's necessary, I'll give it that. Dark stuff does help this one edge out a place in people's minds. But I don't quite see it influencing the industry with it. Ignore that. And I'm not willing to dismiss its popularity on just that. But I'll ask this. Where does gore and death shine best in an anime? Action scenes for sure. And the animation with these is definitely good. So I'll praise this show for that. And I think that fills out why this is popular in the first place. It's not just that it's gory or well animated. It's that those things blend to make it a memorable experience. One with hyped action scenes backed by a world given enough detail that the audience is invested. When you compound that with the target demographic of younger men and boys looking to vent, that's a recipe for success right there. So we've got why this show is popular, but that still leaves the question of why am I looking at it? No, seriously, why was I looking at this show? I guess because it shaped action for the genre? Yeah, let's go with that. Because the focus on fights is so intense and the rest of the animation is passable to mediocre, I guess we could say that this pushed the medium more towards being battle and badass oriented. That's definitely not something I pulled out of my ass just now. When a popular anime does something well, others imitate it. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all that other YouTube stuff because that really helps me out. Thanks for watching.